Chapter titles hook the reader. What are chapter titles? Well, they're a short, descriptive word or phrase to introduce the topic that's going to be talked about in that chapter. It can serve as a roadmap, help to give your reader a glimpse of what's to come in the chapter. It can set the tone, spark curiosity, and even reinforce the message of your book. What can chapter titles do? Number one, guides the reader. This can help the reader see how the book's content is broken into manageable sections. The reader can flip to a specific chapter based on a title if they want to. And keep in mind, if your book is on Amazon, they have like a sneak peek, check inside or whatever they call it, see a sample, and usually they will display the table of contents. And with that table of contents then are your chapter titles. So if someone's trying to decide if they want to buy your book or not, they may have read your description and now they're looking at the sneak peek and they see your table of contents and they look at your chapter titles and they might be like, that's interesting, or no, those aren't the topics that I want, or whatever, good or bad. But it can give them a peek into what your book is going to talk about. Number two, can set expectations. Gives a glimpse into the chapter's content. Number three, engage curiosity. A well-crafted title can pique a reader's interest through intrigue, making them want to keep reading. Now, a chapter title can be more obscure. Again, sometimes you want to maybe not be too obscure, but with a chapter title, you have a little more liberty. You can be a little more fun with it. What you want to do if you do use a title like that that's a little more obscure for a chapter is somehow incorporate that into the body of your text in that chapter so that the chapter title makes sense. It'll help explain why you labeled it what you did for the title within the body of that chapter. Number four, a chapter title supports the book's theme. Each chapter pulls the overarching theme of the book together, and then those titles kind of links everything together. The next, clear and relevant. It should reflect the content or key takeaways of the chapter. So if you're not using an obscure title, and again, you have a little more leeway with chapter titles if you're going to use obscurity. Otherwise, try to keep them clear and concise, very relevant to the content of that chapter. Short and impactful. Again, don't make long titles, especially your chapter titles. They do not need to be long. Keep them short. You can try to make them catchy and grab attention. I mean, yes, they've already bought your book, but still you want them to keep reading your book. Emotion or intrigue. You can tap into somebody's emotion, make it very intriguing. It pulls them in, especially if you're tapping into emotion. It should pull them in to want to read that chapter. Imagery or metaphors. Let's say the singing purple cow was a chapter title. Well, that's imagery, and it's pretty memorable. It's obscure. It doesn't necessarily tell you what the chapter's about, but it can be intriguing enough for people to want to keep reading. Why in the world did they call this chapter the singing purple cow? Again, if you were to do that within the body of your chapter, you want to tie the chapter to the title so that the title does make sense. Maybe it's a story. Maybe it's something that happened to you, and that's kind of where this title came from. Then it'll all make sense. I've read books like that, and I have no idea why they titled it this, but then as I read the chapter, they told a story of something that happened or whatever it was, and it tied the title right to it. The next thing, aligns with the book's tone. Overall, you want your title to keep with whatever, the tone or theme of your book is. For example, if you're writing a very humorous book, you might want to keep humorous titles. Every chapter be somewhat humorous, or at the very least, catchy and intriguing, something like that. Okay, the next one is ask questions. These can cause your reader to want to read the chapter to find out the answer. Your chapter title can actually be a question, and that can be very effective because you might be asking your reader, let's say your chapter title was, Does a Liver Detox Work? Now they're going to want to read the chapter to find out if it really works or not. There's a lot of false information out in the world, and if you can give them an answer to a question that maybe they've been wondering, is this really true or not, that can draw them in. And again, keep in mind, yes, they bought the book, but maybe they haven't bought the book and they are looking at your table of contents and they're reading your chapter titles. If they see something like that, it might intrigue them enough to want to then buy your book. Shocking statements. These can be very effective for not only chapter titles, but potentially a book title if you can, get it to work right. But they can stir up emotions and even create intrigue. Shocking statements can be something that's like the opposite. Like that one, it said, stop apologizing. Like, what? Why would I do that? That's kind of a shocking statement. It was a point of view, but it was also a shocking statement. So they can be very effective if it fits whatever it is you're writing. Highlight benefits or results. This can help the reader get a hint at what they will gain by reading the chapter. Some insight. Again, it's insight as to what the chapter's about. In conclusion, you want to keep your reader engaged. You want them to read the whole book. You don't want them to stop reading. And yes, your content, if your content is good enough, it doesn't matter so much what your title is, your chapter title, because they're going to want to keep reading anyways, because so far the content has been good. If they aren't sure if they want to read all of this, a chapter title might intrigue them to read. Or some people might pick and choose what chapters they read in a book, and if the title is intriguing enough, it could pull them in. Your chapter titles are the first thing that they see before they read that chapter. Make it relevant, make it intriguing, something to draw them in. Because, again, I want to emphasize this, again, you might be like, who cares? They've already bought the book. But a lot of people will look at the table of contents to find out your chapter titles, because that gives, even though you have your description, the table of contents gives them a little bit more breakdown of what each chapter is about. And if they find that those chapter titles contain content that they're going to be interested in, they're more likely to buy your book. So it's not just about, okay, they've bought my book, my chapter titles don't mean all that much. No, your chapter titles could also come into play if someone's trying to decide if they want to buy your book or not. So keep that in mind. Your action steps. When you are ready to name your chapters, and this is just like your book title, your subtitle, it is not important to know the name of your chapter while you're writing it. You can wait. When you go through your self-editing process, you can determine your chapter titles at that time. As you start coming up with ideas, write them down. If you're getting multiple ideas for a chapter, just write them down. And decide later which one is going to be the best, or maybe none of them. And again, if you want some help or just want to share what you're working on, you can post it in the Facebook group. You can always do a poll to get feedback on some chapter titles if you want to. Have fun with it. Again, don't worry about chapter titles. If you're in the middle of your writing and you're kind of struggling with that, it doesn't have to be done. You can go back and add chapter titles when you are doing your self-editing stage.